Growing is learning the world changes around us, and you either learn to embrace change or find yourself left behind. Growing is also learning who you are and becoming comfortable in your skin. Whether it's as a father, a husband, a creator, or professional, Casey Palmer does his best to share the wisdom he has learned. Let's get into it. Fantastic. So Casey, thank you again for joining me last time. It was you and the other founders of the Black Canadian Creators Directory talking about that. But, I've been connecting with individuals. I talked with Shirley before. And now I wanted to connect with you to find out a little bit more about your life and your work, a little one-on-one. So for our audience out there, let's start with a quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
All right. That is not an easy question, Ryan, but let's see what we can do to unpack this. So
exactly. It's like, who am I?
I've had a lot of time to think about this, but okay. This is the way I've been phrasing it as of late. I am Casey Palmer, a 40-something bureaucrat and content creator out of Toronto, Ontario. The tagline is father to two, husband to one, second to none. And I've come from the world of creating fatherhood content as a blogger originally, but now I'm starting to diversify and look at different ways of telling the stories while also managing a team of 50 people in my daytime. So I'm a whole lot of things. There's a lot of things I am simultaneously, but I'm learning to be okay with that.
I think that's the one thing about whenever I sit down and talk with someone, and I think that's the whole point of this podcast series, is finding out that people are multifaceted. They are complex individuals. And you're right. It's hard to sum up exactly what it is, who a person is in their life.
Definitely. I mean, and that's the other thing I'm learning is that, as I start to lead teams of people, I have to be a different me for each of those people because the interactions work differently. So I'm a different me to each of those people, a different me to each of my children, different me to my wife, different me to each of my friends. Like I'm starting to really lean into this understanding that I might have like this core set of, let's say, 30 different traits, and maybe like 27 of them apply to one person, 22 to another person. And it's a mix and match that I'm constantly figuring out, but getting better at it.
It is interesting going through life, especially as we get older. I hit 30 this year, so now I'm trying to understand a little bit more about, 30 really does feel like you're really coming into your own, or like the real awakening. It's like, oh,
I'll tell you, it did. It definitely did for me until I hit 40. And I was just like, yes, I don't even remember 30 at this point anymore. I had a huge party and everything. And my 30s were definitely a decade of high productivity, but not necessarily high realization until we hit like our lovely pandemic. And that gave me a lot of time to understand a lot of things. And I feel like now in my 40s, I'll be able to take a lot of that learning and start applying it towards things, which is a really good feeling.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's that we always think when we hit like a decade milestone, it's like, I know who I am now. Like when you're 10, it's like, oh yeah, I know everything. Like I'm the master of my own domain now. And then you hit 20 and you're like, you know what? I'm invincible. I can take on the world. You hit 30, you're like, okay, I have a little bit understanding of things now, things to work on. And then, for yourself, 40, you're like, you know what? I've developed those skills enough. I'm ready to take on this larger goal.
I feel like you've been talking to my 10-year-old because he does think he knows everything and he most definitely does not. And I have to remind him of this daily. I'm like, I've been on this planet 30 more years and like, I know some things, like chill, I got you. And he's just like, no, this person said this. I'm like, that person's wrong. They are also 10. You both know nothing.
It's like never trust people talking on the playground. I remember so many stories of people being like, yeah, my uncle or my dad works at Nintendo. I know when the next game or thing's coming out. It's like, really? It's like, of course now it's like they're just pulling stuff out of their ass. They have no idea what's going on. They're just trying to get your approval.
Oh my gosh, so true. But it's in a good space of learning all the things and figuring out the best way to use time and energy in life has been my new standard, I should say.
Walk me through that kind of diversification that you're talking about, starting out creating blogs about fatherhood, and now you're trying to find the different avenues of creativity. Was that because of just the shifting social media and media landscape as a whole?
Funnily enough, no. I was like, I find that every generation of creators kind of wants things to stay the same way that they've had it forever and a day, right? So I came up as a creator in the era of bloggers, and we're just kind of like, no, like we see, like you can see the writing on the wall. We saw like, Instagram came along and then video really picked up, especially when TikTok came into play. And this is just like the way the world is going. People want more like small bites of information to work with and everything. They want to see, they want more than one sense to be engaged when they're engaging with content. And we're just kind of like, whatever. We're written word has been here since the dawn of time. It's gonna be here forever.
It's
And
fine.
everything's fine. It's like the dinosaurs in the media, right? Like, oh, it's fine. Everything's gonna be okay. And while the written word hasn't gone away, there's so many more ways to express when it comes down to the tools and resources available to us today. And so it actually, I only really started thinking about that heavily when through the pandemic. I'm somebody who likes to work with a soundtrack, and I find that when I listen to my favorite songs, I get distracted because I start singing along and I lose track of whatever I'm working on. So TV, movie streaming was kind of like the best way to have like a background something going on. And I found that as I went through, like, yeah, it's been 4 years now. So as I went through the years of COVID, I'm using air quotes, post COVID, and everything that happened there, I got through my entire list of everything I wanted to stream, and then it got to a point where it's just kind of like, what do I watch
Yeah,
now?
what's
Like
next? Out of the
I've gone
unlimited
through everything.
possibilities, it's like I've gone through the entire library of Alexandria.
Right, right, exactly. And then I got into YouTube because I've had a YouTube account since like it launched back in late 2005. And while I dabbled with video here and there, I was always kind of like, I don't have the time, or it costs too much money for the equipment, or yada yada yada. And I was always like, this is a young people's game. I can't do this. And then as I watched more and more, like Kaya is a great example where she's been working on her 2 channels and she's doing great at it. And I'd watch her stuff religiously. Like she comes out, I'm there. I'm comment, I do the things because I'm a super fan of my good friends. But then I started kind of venturing out to other spaces because I was interested in these other things like cinematography or like, storytelling or the different things. And I was like, there's an entire universe of people out here talking about things I actually care about. And I started realizing that you can cater to more specific kind of people by creating the content that you would want to be seeing for yourself. And as I started looking at more of the entire, like, here are the things I learned from like a year on YouTube or on my journey to like 500 subscribers, what I started realizing is like more and more often, like the people who were giving their point of view were like 20, 25. And I was like, where are us old curmudgeony people and the things that we're observing in the world and all that kind of like dad advice and stuff like that? And I was like, I think I need to like put some things together. So I've actually been working pretty heavily on YouTube scripts and coming up with just kind of like the next wave of what I want to put into the world, because I feel like there's so much I've produced. I produced like 1,200 blog posts on my site. I have 500 drafts sitting on the back end of the site. I have all these notes sitting around of all these things I've learned over time. And I was like, I think I can put something out there that's going to be useful. And I've been working heavily on that.
And I think it's so important to have that diversity of experiences when going through. I love listening to, like, I'm recently getting back into paleontology. It's my current hyperfixation again. So I'm really been enjoying exploring and learning about the different species and things throughout the history of life, and watching from young people's perspectives, people who are like, hey, I'm new into paleontology, like I'm hungry, following the experiences, and then listening to older stories about people who have been in the industry for a long time and seeing the different perspectives, which is a lot of fun. And I mean, of course, in paleontology, there's so much like conflicting things because you're working with,
Of course.
small amount, like pieces of materials. You're like, okay, we can infer this because it's related to this, or like we're trying to do, it's kind of like forensic analysis, like for a crime scene. You only have some information and you're trying to paint a picture. So of course there's like discussion and debates and like people like being specifically when it comes to like Spinosaurus, there's so much contention around it. It's like, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? But it's fun listening to all those stories, specifically in this avenue, because The stakes really aren't that high in terms of paleontology. When people are arguing, like, no one's really getting their feelings hurt. It's more of like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to challenge that. I want to explore that. So it's fun seeing all these different avenues and different perspectives.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like when you really think about it, it's one of these spaces where I know you said the stakes aren't really that high, but in a way, you can reshape the entire collective knowledge of our species. Because I tell my kids all the time, it's like I grew up at a time where Pluto was still a planet, and now we're just kind of like toss that one out the window. And we have a rough, I'd say pretty rough understanding of like what things were like 65 million years ago. But technology keeps improving, and knowledge keeps improving, and eventually we'll probably get to a point where we have a much clearer understanding of what things were like back then versus like our interpretation.
Oh, like it's so interesting looking through the evolution since the early 1800s until now. Like
Mm.
that, those first things being like these slow, sluggish animals that they went extinct because they were just too dumb, too stupid, to these active species filling a ton of different niches, and
Hmm.
just they're as vast and diverse as the species we have now. So yeah, like in your conversation about like your opinions, putting them out there to engage with people, I think that's perfect because we need diverse opinions. Because sometimes if we're looking at some of the issues, if we're looking at
Hmm.
politics, for example, sometimes there isn't a lot of conversation around there. It's very polarized. It's like, it's this and it's this. And then, it ends up being this crazy side on both ends. And there's not really a good understanding about like, why is it that this person identifies with this politics? What led to that avenue? And you don't really have those like analyses.
No, that's exactly it. And that's a big part of where I guess there's opportunity, if you will. Like when it comes down to being able to fill a gap that either you didn't recognize existed or people don't really understand exists. Now at this point, I 40 was last year for me, so I'm creeping up on 41 now sometime soon. It's happening in July. One of the things I'm realizing now is that, in my 20s and 30s, I feel like everything felt like I was always on a hamster wheel or against a deadline. Like I need to do this because I needed to be the first one to do this. I need to be like, on top of things. I need to be ahead. And now I'm more like, I got all the time in the world, really. Like I can wait to do this thing as long as needed. I was going to put out a series for like, 40 straight days. I was going to talk about 40 things I learned on the way to turning 40. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I've always going to have 40. 40 is always the thing I accomplished making it this far. And it doesn't have to be a daily thing. It can be a weekly thing. It can be in a different format. It doesn't have to be like everything needs to happen like right away. So I'm learning to give things the time they're worth to make them good versus focusing so much on how do I, fill this gap now, because that's how you burn yourself out. That's how you get to a point where you're just fried.
It's so easy to get lost in that grind and
Hmm.
the rat race that we're seeing,
Hmm.
specifically in media. Like things are changing all the time. So if we're looking at YouTube, the YouTube algorithm, like how many of the YouTube vanguard of original creators are now moving on to different things because they're like, hey, I want to create this sort of thing, but it doesn't
Hmm.
work in this sort of environment. The Try Guys, the people who broke away from College Humor. I can't remember what their new network is called, but they have a show called Game Changer and things. They're like developing new formats and new places to experience content. I mean, for better or for worse, like who knows how a widespread network of everyone having a streaming platform will go in the future. But it's about that flexibility and that change, and that you don't necessarily have to be tied to this one avenue.
I feel like, to answer that question, if we look at like Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Crave, Prime Video, everyone's already annoyed. So like I don't see it turning out initially well. But I think what it does is inspire competition and evolution, where we get to like wherever it is we're eventually meant to be will happen from like taking all these different paths to get there. And if we just stayed with the one monopolistic thing, that would stifle that. So I think it has its purpose. It's just I think we're going to be annoyed for quite some time yet when it comes down to how we consume content until it stabilizes as like, oh, it's this that we wanted.
How do you keep yourself motivated for creating projects? You know, you're mentioning like 1,200 blog posts, 500 drafts. Now you're looking at different avenues, although at your own pace. How do you stay motivated? How do you get yourself to be like, yes, I'm going to work on this project? Because I know for a lot of individuals, sometimes you get to that blank sheet for writing a script or working on whatever project you are, and you just feel paralyzed.
It's going to sound cliche, but the answer to the question is what's your why, right? And I feel like a person's why can change over time. So when I started creating content online, my first reason why I was doing it is because I wanted to be the best creator in Toronto. I didn't have any metrics for that or anything. I was just like, no, I just want to be the best. It could be like the greatest number of followers or most people talking about me. Who knows? But yeah, that was my initial thing. And then we had our first kid. And I was just kind of like, oh, like I can use this as a way to get different opportunities and give my kids more than, my parents were in a position to give me. And that was okay for a little while. But then I started realizing as they got older that like your kids don't need stuff. They need your time and attention. So like, okay, throw that one out the window. Then I started like, okay, maybe what I'm trying to do here is my parents are very closed off. They, Jamaican culture in general, we are very private people. Like you keep your things to your family. So I was like, no, I don't want that for my kids. I want my kids to have a firm understanding of who I am so that when they grow up, they don't have any questions about who was daddy, and they can see things from my perspective as they go through the various, stages of their life. And then we had a pandemic and I was like, I don't want to do anything for you guys anymore. I'm with you all day. This is driving me nuts.
I need a
like,
break.
I'm not doing it for you. I'm like, this is not why I do this. And I eventually realized my why is because I want to tell my stories to the greatest potential possible. I feel like each of the stories I have has a final form it's trying to get to, and I just need to keep working at them and carving them out until they reach that point. And that's where I'm at now. That's why I keep going, where it's just like I see all these bits and pieces of stories. I literally finished my first full YouTube script, and I'm very,
Wow.
very happy with how it all came together. And it basically is just a story of how I've had a YouTube account all these years. And I finally got to the point where I was like, now I'm ready to become a YouTuber, and had to explain that entire story so that I can get to the second video, which will be, what is your why? Why am I doing this? What kind of things do I want to put into the world? What value will it have? And it's all this longer form kind of storytelling stuff that's going to mix in, hoping to mix in some cinematography, some animation and things like that to like really touch on the multiple facets of my life versus it just being me talking to the camera for like stretches of time. But I feel like it's finally the medium which will allow me to take all these bits and pieces of Casey Palmer and start to marry it into one space where it's like, this is the way I wanted to tell this story all along. Yeah, I think my why is just being like, I just feel like there's a lot out there that's available to tap into that I just haven't had the ability to do that in the past just because technological limitations, things took too long. And now just like we can start to do it in a way that is a lot more fluid. And I want to embrace that.
Wow, that's exciting. I'm really excited to see how that evolves and grows over time. And I also like that aspect when you're talking about your story of like, how your why for yourself has kind of evolved and changed over time. Becoming a father, you felt that was very important, and then it kind of changed. And I mean, I think that's the exciting part, and we've covered it a little bit at the beginning of how the human experience and each human person has an intricate story about their lives. And I really appreciate you taking the effort to get your kids to know who you are, because oftentimes kids don't really know who their
Very true.
parents are. They almost have this kind of like mythicized version of who you are. You're like, oh, they were all these, but it's like, well, who were they
100%.
as a person? And that's something that I'm learning as, now I'm 30. I'm at the age that my parents were as I was growing up. And it's like, oh yeah, this is how I feel now. It's like, do I feel like an adult? Not really.
But
Sometimes like you feel like you just go through life and
well,
some
it's
of
so
those
true
changes.
though, because like, I was working on like I spent a lot of the pandemic working on a book on Black fatherhood, which I eventually had to kind of like put on hold. And the reason why is because I recognized that the voice I was talking about, my father in the book, was a voice of myself as a kid. Whereas like I look at who he is and who I am in his last like 10, 15 years and the relationship we have now, I see him as a completely different person because like I can appreciate so much more of who he is and what he had to go through in the context of raising me when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, you
Hmm.
felt this way because I wouldn't listen sometimes, or like you've worked like a 14-hour day and you come home and the house is a disaster because your kids are all over the place. And I was like, I get it so much more now. Oh my gosh. So there's a lot there that is just like you need to almost like do these self checks, right? And continue to like make sure that what you're putting out into the world, especially, in something that's as public as the internet and things live forever, you need to make sure that what you're putting out is authentic to who you are now and not before. And I feel like not enough of us do that, where we like try to update things.
You can definitely see it when watching vloggers or YouTubers when it is
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
performance. At least for myself, when someone's like, "Hey, what's up, guys? Let's do. Here's all the things." Blah blah, and I'm like, I'm
Yes.
instantly turned off from that moment. Of it's like you are putting
Mm-hmm.
on a character, and of course, we always have
Mm-hmm.
different masks and things when we're engaging with people. Like we're all different parts, as you've mentioned before. But there is a moment of vulnerability and authenticity that I
Yes.
want to see out of someone when they're talking to me or specifically exploring a topic because I'm not going to relate to or I'm going to use the word respect the opinions of
Sure.
someone that are like blah, 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 like just
Mm-hmm.
all over the place. And we see it in all avenues, whether it's the like, oh, I'm the tough guy. This is how you
Yeah.
pick up
Yeah.
chicks and stuff like that, or like the crazy people. I want someone who's real, vulnerable, and willing to share their true thoughts and feelings. And I think it's pretty easy to tell when someone is faking. Like when someone says something, you're like, I don't think you actually believe
No, I
what you're
agree.
saying.
And I feel like I'm fortunate with the job I have right now, with the circles I run in, and with the way I'm telling my stories now. I feel like I can take the same Casey in every situation. I was telling my I'm a senior manager, so my boss is a director at work, and I was telling him this is the first job I think I've had where I feel like I can take 100% of myself, develop a team, and they actually just embrace it. They're not trying to like make me anything else. They're just very much like, no, we vibe with this version of you, and I'm like, this is who I am all the time. And so I don't feel like I have to, go into work mode when I get in the office. I don't feel like I have to change anything around. I'm just me all day, and it's comforting, right? To be able to like, feel comfortable enough in one's skin that you just like, I don't have to put on a performance. I don't have to, feel like I have to protect who I am in any given space. I'm just kind of like, you get this person all the time, for better, for worse. And I'm not for everyone. I won't vibe with everyone, and that is fine. Like I'm not trying to impress everybody under the sun. I usually tell people in meetings, there's three people generally that I worry about what they think of me, and I happen to live with all of them. So hey.
Yeah, that's important. Understanding how much you're giving out into the world and who you're giving it to. Because I've had that experience. I've run a couple of D&D games where I've opened it up to like random people in the community, be like, "Hey, I'm running this game. Let's see how it works." And sometimes you just don't vibe with people. It just doesn't. And if you force it, you're going to burn yourself out like any sort of endeavor.
Yep, I actually played my first D&D game. I looked at the DM books a lot, the Dungeon Master books a lot when I was young because I was always interested in there's all the mechanics, but I never actually got a chance to play D&D because I just didn't have people around me who played, right? So I didn't play for the first time until I actually joined this team, and I had someone on my team who would run lunchtime D&D games out of our boardroom, and I was like, "Yo,
Oh, that's
let's
so
go!" And he's
exciting.
like,
That's so
"Hold on,
fun.
but." Like you're our boss. You want to play? I'm like, I'll kick your butt. It was like, not the point of the game, but we'll figure this out.
D&D has so
Yeah.
many applications, particularly if we're looking at teams, like
Hmm.
team building,
Hmm.
collaboration, out of the box thinking, collaborative storytelling. It's all elements that can benefit a work environment or personal environments as well.
Big time. I think it's one of those things that, we're a very work hard, play hard team. And I know that I'm full of cliches today, but like I'm very big into celebrating the team and giving us enough opportunities just to laugh and spend time together without having to, worry about metrics and phone calls and whatever else. And D&D is just like an example of where you get to see everyone's thinking processes and how they problem solve and we've been able to apply some of that back to the jobs. You'd be like, oh, like you probably think this because you did that thing in that game of D&D, and you're like, I do think that, and we're like, okay, and it's helping everyone to understand each other in a deeper, richer way, than they would if we just kind of like stuck to the work itself.
Yeah, understanding people's innate strengths and,
Hmm.
things that they need assistances. Like every
Hmm.
person thrives in one area, but not in all
Yeah.
areas. And that's where that team works. Like when we're talking about D&D language, your team composition, who's in your team, what
Hmm.
sort of roles and things people are playing in order to find success in your adventure.
Very much so.
Part of your role when we're breaking it up, like as a content creator, is also
Hmm.
providing opportunities for others and uplifting Black voices and Black creators here in Canada. You and three others creating the Black content, the Black Canadian Creators Directory.
Boom, got
I'll get it
it.
one of these days. One of these
All
days it'll
good,
be
right?
locked in. And I've been looking at it. I've connected with some people and seen some of their names trying to set up other interviews, but I've seen this list grow and develop and people in
Yes.
all avenues, from like creating blogs or like YouTube videos like yourself to people in cinematography, creating
Hmm.
advertisements, to like writers and things. It's such a vast group of people. How do you feel it's been growing and developing and how people have been utilizing it?
Yeah, well, it's closing in on 600 people now, which is mind-boggling, because it was born from a place where we just didn't feel like there was a lot of visibility when it came to Black Canadian creators in multimedia we saw and the opportunities out there and whatnot. And I think it definitely lends a lot of success to like seeing Black creators finally starting to like get their flowers and get their due and whatnot. I know that I go back to the example of Kea because she's just doing like amazingly. And I know being able to help foster an environment where she feels like she can be seen as herself is so key. And that's a sentiment I've heard mirrored from so many others and people who've gotten in touch because of the directory. So yeah, no, I think we're in a space where it's being a very, very useful platform to make sure everyone is represented the way they want to be represented. And then making it free and accessible to everyone has made it so that people can go find the people that are relevant to them as much as possible. So
Yeah.
it's been good to see it thrive.
It's so important to have avenues and places where people can go and find that diversity out there.
Hmm.
If you just rely on your normal facets of like algorithms or things to find certain creators, you're never going to find necessarily something that jives with you 100% or something outside of your norm. Like I find my TikTok algorithm thinks I'm this kind of person. And it's like, yeah, there are some elements
Yeah.
that I enjoy in there, but I also want some of these elements, like
Hmm.
I'm finally broken into a scene where I'm finding way more diverse comedians and things to watch.
Nice.
Because so long, it's just like, here's a bunch of these 40 to 50-year-old white guys that are all like, cancel culture. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't care about that anymore. You guys aren't funny. I want to find some other things. And now I'm finally finding diverse, like great female comedians, like diverse in both
Nice.
like identity, sexuality, things like that. People
Hmm.
of different nationalities. It's been so exciting seeing these diverse voices. And particularly in music, like Spotify is
Hmm.
starting to connect me with musicians that I never would have before. And I feel, has been a very fulfilling experience for myself.
That's awesome. And I mean, you're right. Like what I find myself telling my peers in like the same age range and whatnot is like the world's changing a lot, and we can either make a big deal about it and stay up on like whatever high horse we want to be on, or we can just learn to embrace it and figure out where we fit in it. And I see it through the lens of my children who have dealt with things that when I was their age would have been like a huge deal. But like, like my eldest one, he had a friend who transitioned in how they, wanted to be referred to in gender. And he just came home and like, yeah, their name's now this. And we're like, oh, and we're like thinking as parents, like, oh, we gotta be on this, have those right conversations and everything. Like, okay, do you want to talk about it? Do you sit down? It's like their name is now, what is the deal? Like, why are you freaking out about this? Like their name's now this, just call them that from now on. I'm like, I had to do some real like self-assessment and self-reflection on that. Like, oh, like I'm the dinosaur. I'm the one who's just kind of like, oh no, these are things that are a big deal. They were a big deal maybe like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2020, whatever, right? It's the world's changing. We can either embrace that and figure out how to adapt and still be ourselves, but in this new context, or we can do things the way they've always been done and probably fail miserably because we refuse to change.
Yeah, when things don't change, that's where we see struggles, like businesses that decide, nope, this is the only way we do things. They fail. They don't succeed. They don't change with the times. And I mean, we're seeing that overall with even large mega corporations that they want to drag their feet, and people are like, excuse me, like, and they're suffering the consequences of it. It's like, change, be open to new opportunities.
Yeah, people will invest their dollars where their hearts lie, basically, where it aligns with their interests, aligns with their being. You'll find more often than not, if you can tap into that, this is a PSA to all the businesses out there, maybe care about people. It's probably going to end up turning out rather well for you if you actually genuinely care about them and stop being performative, putting it out there in the universe. But yes, I think we have a lot to learn when it comes down, like collectively as people, when it comes down to understanding that if we build spaces that speak to us or participate in spaces that speak to us, only good things can come from that. If we go in that genuinely and just try to make them as successful as possible, only good things can come.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for taking this time to chat with me. Always a pleasure to connect with you and hear what's going on in your life. For people out there who want to learn more about you and experience this renaissance of content that's on the way, where can they go?
Excellent question, Ryan, and always love chatting. I'm at caseypalmer.com for the website, and that links to all the other places. You'll find me under Casey Palmer pretty much anywhere. YouTube, Instagram, some go under Case Peasy as you get to TikTok and Snapchat, but don't worry about those. Just focus on Casey Palmer. I'm easy to find.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.